The suit seeks to stop implementation of Governor James's pay and classification study. State employees say the plan is arbitrary and contrary to the Constitution of Alabama. Paul Smith, Executive Director for the State Employees Association.
In April, the State Personnel Board held a hearing on these proposed pay and classification plans. And at that time, even the members of the board couldn't explain what or understand what was going on, or couldn't intelligently explain the proposals. And since that time, we have not seen anything come forth to do this, and we're filing suit to stop it because we feel that it adversely affects thousands of state employees. It effectively ends their chances of career advancement with the state of Alabama because so many positions are downgraded. We're also very concerned with the effect it has on the merit system, in that we feel that this opens the door for favoritism, who you know, your cousin, or whoever else getting positions as far as appointments and promotions.
The last time jobs were reclassified for state employees here in the state of Alabama was back in the 50s, but there was no state employee association to challenge the validity of the changes. But this group says it plans to take other action in the future to make sure that jobs for state employees remain secure. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Michael Hanks of the Better Business Bureau says the Birmingham office of Better Business received 90,000 phone calls from the central Alabama area last year, with most of those from Montgomery. Hanks has been meeting with Montgomery Chamber of Commerce officials as well as civic organizations in an effort to publicize the new bureau office. He says right now there are 1,300 Better Business Bureau members in the central Alabama area, with expectations of several hundred more. Hanks says all businesses are investigated and dozens of checks are made before a business can join the Bureau. Besides serving the business community and consumers, Hanks says the Bureau also serves many non-profit organizations. Most importantly, Hanks says his organization, which is funded entirely by private business, will work closely with the Attorney General's Office of Consumer Protection.
The reason being is that the Better Business Bureau has no legal power, so in my travels across central Alabama and the Montgomery area, if I run into a scam or a scheme that has taken hard-earned money out of consumers' pocket in this area and funneling into the pocket of these renegades, I will certainly report it to the Consumer Protection Division.
Hank says after laying the groundwork for the new office, he's optimistic that it will be open within a few weeks. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The Federal Aviation Administration has asked that all airlines coming out of the Atlanta airport cut their flight service by 50%. At Danley Field here in Montgomery, Delta station manager Gil Malik says the airline will only run 3 of its 7 flights today, and he says the airline is making every effort to see that the passengers are rescheduled on other airlines whenever possible. One airline that seems to be prospering by the strike is Atlantic Southeast. ASA has run all 5 of its flights to Atlanta and even scheduled an additional flight this afternoon at 3:10 to carry passengers to Atlanta who are originally scheduled to fly on one of the canceled Delta flights. Another airline that hasn't been affected locally by the strike is Republic. On a national level, Republic Airlines has cut its air service by 90%, but today all 4 Republic flights ran as scheduled. Of course, some other possibilities for travelers include charter planes and buses. Officials with Hangar 1 and Montgomery Aviation say they haven't gotten many calls because of the strike, but officials with Greyhound and Trailway bus lines say they've received a large number of calls from people wanting bus schedule information. Since it's the middle of the vacation season, both bus lines have large riderships, but Greyhound District Manager Ray Tucker says the Greyhound is ready for any increase in passengers and has extra buses and drivers standing by. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Dr. Payton says initially he didn't think he'd accept the top job, but after visiting the campus and talking to the faculty and students, his mind was made up. As Tuskegee Institute's 5th president, Dr. Payton says he intends to do what the school's founder, Booker T. Washington, would expect, to be the best president he can be.
We will need to do everything in our power to let people know that when they invest in Tuskegee Institute, they are in fact investing in an asset that will provide many returns manifold. for people.
Hayden says his administration will focus on broadening the school's involvement in international programs and completely renovating classroom facilities and student personnel services. He says the biggest challenge facing his new administration will be securing funds. Hayden says Tuskegee has great potential for receiving financial support, but he says with tougher times facing colleges and universities, we'll have to work harder at it. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News, Tuskegee.
In April, the State Personnel Board held a hearing on these proposed pay and classification plans. And at that time, even the members of the board couldn't explain what or understand what was going on, or couldn't intelligently explain the proposals. And since that time, we have not seen anything come forth to do this. And we're filing suit to stop it because we feel that it adversely affects thousands of state employees. It effectively ends their chances of career advancement with the state of Alabama because so many positions are downgraded. We're also very concerned with the effect it has on the merit system, in that we feel that this opens the door for favoritism, who you know, your cousin or whoever else getting positions as far as appointments and promotions.
The reason being is that the Better Business Bureau has no legal power, so in my travels across central Alabama and the Montgomery area, if I run into a scam or a scheme that has taken hard-earned money out of consumers' pocket in this area and funneling into the pocket of these renegades, I will certainly report it to the Consumer Protection Division.
Speaking as a controller here in Montgomery, no. I don't feel like the supervisory personnel here in Montgomery are qualified to work the traffic, and I don't believe that the solution to the problem is bringing in the military. Everybody in this room has probably had prior military experience, and it's an entirely different world between military and the type of traffic that we work.
Coach, this guy next to us here doesn't say a lot. I guess he likes for his actions to speak louder than his words. Huh?
I guess that's right. I know one thing. He's probably the most popular Auburn person in the world.
Your daughter's still in love with him?
Yeah, absolutely. Wanda loves him to death.
You're making an inordinate number of trips to Montgomery, Coach. Is this by design?
Well, I don't know whether it's by design or not, but I think Montgomery is very important to Auburn, and we have an awful lot of Auburn people here, and I like Montgomery.
Okay, how about that? I've noticed the billboards all around. Is this a statewide project?
Well, it should be all over the state. There's a few in Florida and a few in Georgia, and it's part of our promotion package that we put together for this year.
Anson Mount of Playboy magazine has picked Auburn to finish last in the conference. You got any response to that?
Well, you know, the fortunate thing about all the magazines and all the papers and is that they don't play on Saturday, and that's the only thing that matters to us is our players and our fans, and I guess, you know, they've got a reason for picking us where they did, and, you know, they may be right, but we're going to play 11 games and find out.
Anson's a Vanderbilt man, I think, too, and he wanted to.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. You know, did he have Vanderbilt?
Yeah, Vanderbilt night.
Well, good, good. That's, you know, I wish we played Vanderbilt.
we come off the corner, the three of us were tight together, and Darrell, he kind of went for the middle of the racetrack, and Terry, he went for the outside, and when he went to the outside, Darrell kind of ran up in front of him a little bit, and it left the whole bottom open, and I just got a good shot, and I come right through the bottom.
Okay, the case took place in the circuit court in which the case was not dismissed. It was simply said that we did not have the approval of the Attorney General to file the suit, so there was no case at all. We have asked the Supreme Court of the state of Alabama to mandamus the case and force the circuit judge to hear the case on the merits. In addition, today we asked the Board of Control to approve and hire outside attorneys to pursue that case additionally. In case that doesn't work, we'll just go back to circuit court and I'll file in my own name.
Governor James was received with what some have described as polite applause by the members of the House and Senate. His speech was unusually short, lasting only about 15 minutes, but his point was clear.
We need to pass an education budget as soon as possible. I am submitting my budget tonight.
His education budget, introduced by Walter Owens in the House, is different from the one he drafted during the regular session earlier this year, about $16 million larger, and includes some concessions to funding of the state's colleges and universities, which didn't sit well with Alabama Education Association Executive Secretary Paul Hubbard.
Overall, I'd have to say we are disappointed in the budget. It again appears that efforts were made to placate and to satisfy higher education in the House leadership.
It's about $263 million going to institutions of higher learning in this budget, and that's not an increase over what we had passed in the House before, but it is a considerable increase over what he introduced before.
And the governor's budget included a conditional appropriation for hospital medical insurance for educators.
I think teachers had a conditional pay raise about 3 years ago, so they understand what conditional means. It means nothing.
But I still think that this year of 10% proration and a shortage of funds that we have is not a year to add benefits in higher ed, not a year to add benefits in teachers' benefits or anything. The teachers deserve it, but yet we don't have enough money to fully fund those areas of funds we need.
In a year in which these individuals cannot receive any salary increases because the monies are not there, to me it is a good morale factor to increase the hospital medical benefits that they are receiving.
Committee work on the budgets is expected to begin tomorrow. The primary emphasis of the governor's speech, however, was the budget isolation bill, later introduced in the Senate by Richmond Pearson and in the House by George Clark. The bill, which apparently has broad support, would prevent bills in either house from being transmitted to the other house until both the general fund and special education trust funds are passed.
We're going to see is some good ideas and some ideas that are going to be proposed with bad intentions, and that being the intention to kill the bill.
But you're optimistic about it?
Yes, I am.
There are some other bills that will be considered, including a bill redesigning Alabama's congressional districts, with most of the changes taking place in Jefferson and Shelby counties, as well as in Lowndes County. And the committee studying methods to invest the windfall oil lease money plan to introduce a bill creating a special authority to handle those investments. And there will also be local bills, which include word of a bingo for charity bill in Montgomery. There was one new member sworn in tonight, John Higginbotham of Florence, elected to replace Lynn Greer, who was appointed to the Public Service Commission earlier this year. And it was the first night for Kay Ivey, the new House reading clerk. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Only half of Delta Airlines' 12 scheduled flights are operating at Montgomery's Danley Field today, but Atlantic Southeast and Republic Airlines are running all their regular flights. Airport Director Ken Muse says the airport is losing about $500 a day in landing fees, parking fees, and other business. While supervisors fill in at the airport for the union controllers, across town the strikers met this morning at PATCO headquarters to show their continued support and make plans. The strikers were pleased with the reports from their union officials that nationwide only 38 members have broken strike. Other reports have been higher, but the controllers say they're putting their faith in their own leaders.
There's a lot of threats, a lot of rumors of people trickling back to work, and through our call-pack committee conference lines last night, we found out these are strictly rumors, and we're staying together.
We're taking our stand now that if things don't improve, then a job may not be worth having.
Others criticized Airport Director Muse for his comment that supervisors know more about air traffic than the controllers. The strikers say the supervisors are required to control air traffic only 2 hours a week. They say Muse knows nothing about air traffic control, and he's a poor judge of a controller's ability. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Occurs in our economy today because that environmental impact statement and more detail and stuff like that, if some people are really interested in that, I can provide them with additional material later. Basically, no dollar support for the state. I think the gasoline price at the pump, it will produce some domestic energy that's the equivalent of about 25,000 barrels of oil a day. That's not a terrible lot when we use about 18 million barrels of oil a day in this country. I think more important, it will lay the basis for a domestic synthetic fuel industry that can expand to several million barrels of oil a day.
Airport Director Ken Muse briefed the board members of the effect the strike is having on the airport, noting that a total of 11 supervisors are manning the tower between 7 in the morning to 10 at night. He says there have been reports of picketers in Birmingham, but says all has been quiet in Huntsville and Mobile. Muse says there's no word on picketing here, but PATCO members from Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, and Columbus, Georgia have planned to rally tomorrow morning at the local PATCO headquarters to show their continued support for the strike. Airport Authority President Don Reynolds says if the controllers plan on picketing at Dannelly Field, he's sure that the board's position is quite clear. When controllers wanted to picket in April, they voiced some objections to the authority's rules, which only allow 2 traffic controllers at one time to picket, staying within a designated area without initiating any conversations with passers-by. In the meantime, Muse says he hopes that by the end of the week, air traffic in Montgomery will be almost back to normal. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Construction of the new prison facility is slated to begin in mid-December, and by November of next year, about 600 inmates should be housed in temporary facilities on the site. The expected completion and occupancy date is in March 1984. The prison initially was planned to hold 600 inmates in single 60-square-foot cells, but the new design for 2-man cells calls for 68 square feet, as recommended by the American Correction Association. The new facility also will have an additional 600,000 square foot space for the industrial work release program and 2 more guard towers. The committee vote was unanimous for the double-celling expansion, but not for appropriating money needed to pay for the prison. Birmingham Representative Fred Olive says more deliberation on the facility was needed, and Tuscaloosa's Big Ed Robertson was concerned about the sewage disposal system, which is planned to empty the waste in waters flowing toward his Senate district. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
FAR's request to picket came at the very end of the council meeting. The resolution didn't obtain the required unanimous council votes to be acted upon, so it will be placed on next week's agenda. But Councilman Joe Reed says he doesn't think the council has the right to stop the controllers from picketing as long as they're not obstructing traffic. FARB had asked that his group be allowed to picket 3 of the entrances leading into Dannelly Field, and he anticipated that 10 pickets would participate. After Reed's comments, Favre said that his group wanted to act within the law and wants to have legal documentation to back them up. But after the council meeting, Favre said that he'll consult his legal counsel to see if it's all right for the members of his group to picket without a permit. He says if his lawyer says okay, the group will picket tomorrow, but says he doesn't want any confrontations and will leave if asked to do so by law enforcement officials. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
When we get our utility bill every month, most of us look directly at the bottom line on the bill, the amount due. Power company spokesman Brian Allen says not reading the entire bill causes a lot of customers to get angry or upset.
They don't bother to go back and look at the dates that that period covered, and it's usually about 2 to 3 weeks beyond the time they get the bill. So if they've been away on vacation for a recent week, they think the bill covers that. They just misinterpret the time that usage was done, and that is printed on the bill. The meter is read, and the date that is read is on your bill every time you get it. If it is not read, there is a column that shows whether or not it's estimated.
A lot of people get upset over the estimated, and they wonder, well, why was it estimated? Why didn't somebody come out here and read it? How was that done, and how can you check on it?
There are numerous reasons for estimating. We generally, and this figure has been authenticated, we estimate about 2% of the bills. Bad weather would probably be the most prevalent reason for us not reading. And these meters have to be read within a time span of about 5 days to go into the billing system. And if it rains for 4 or 5 days or for 3 days and the meter reader can't get here, then they'll send in an estimated. Dogs and gates and this kind of thing causes estimations sometimes. Sickness with meter readers do. But the biggest thing is weather.
But if somebody saw that theirs had been estimated and they wanted somebody to read it, is that possible?
Yes.
How do they do
If
that?
it's been estimated, they call down to the office and we will reread that meter.
The power company strongly advocates reading your electric meters. Doing this, you can get a good idea of how much power you're using and about how much your next bill will be. Your meter will have 4 or 5 dials, each numbered from 0 to 9. Read from left to right to calculate. If the hand on the dial is between 2 numbers, read the lower number.
Take your last bill and look at the present meter reading and the previous and the present are on there. And if it's, for instance, if it's 15 days since that meter has been read, and you go read it, and by looking at the present reading on your bill, you have some guideline to know whether you're doing it correctly or not. Then you can tell how much usage you've done in the last 15 days and get some type of estimate. The weather remaining constant, what your bill will be.
Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Is going to get a little
More family members were present at this meeting than in the past as members of 4 Alabama PATCO locals and 1 Georgia local rallied at PATCO headquarters this morning. They were there to await the 10 o'clock deadline that would mean unemployment. Reports from the Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, Columbus, Georgia, and Montgomery locals indicated only 2 people broke strike to return to work today. Montgomery PATCO President C.J. Favre congratulated the group on their efforts and pledged the strike would continue.
We're not out here just asking for more money. We're asking for things that are right. We're asking that the FAA address our problems. We're asking that they look at the safety factors that we try to bring out to the public.
When 10 o'clock finally rolled around, the strikers met the moment in silent prayer. Minutes later, though, they broke into applause at word the deadline had been extended. They see the move as a weakening of the government's position. Many of the strikers and their families are concerned that the public has been misinformed. They say money is not the central issue, and they deny that they are in violation of the law, saying they agreed to work for the government under fair conditions. They say conditions now are not fair, and in many cases, they say conditions are unbearable. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
So people, we have support out there.
Before a match was lit, the drugs, along with pistols and rifles confiscated throughout the year, were spread out on display. Bags of marijuana and cocaine, bottles of pills and paraphernalia were all dumped into piles to be torched.
The public has a right to know what happens to all this contraband and weapons when they're seized by law enforcement agencies. Secondly, our office feels that all this stuff should be destroyed and obliterated, and obviously Judge Thomas feels the same way because we filed a petition.
Evans and sheriff's deputies took turns smashing the pistols and rifles from various murder and robbery cases. Evans says usually they let the guns stay in the courts, but he says there are so many that it's dangerous, and the judge felt it was better to get rid of them. Is burning drugs like this going to solve anything?
Well, to solve somebody using those drugs, obviously. They won't get their hands on that.
Well, does that mean more drugs are coming into the county?
It means that the police officers are catching more.
But it looks like more are coming in as well.
Right, could be.
Evans says since they've been collecting the guns and drugs so quickly, they're going to conduct the annual burn a little more often. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Representative Horn says state planes have historically been used, misused, and abused, and his bill would keep close tabs on those using state aircrafts for non-business purposes. Horn mentioned several public officials he says are guilty of the practice, including former Governor George Wallace. Horn says Wallace not only used, but wore out state aircraft when running for president. Horn also mentioned Bobby James's trips to religious functions, but he says the icing on the cake came when Governor James recently toured several southern states in support of President Reagan's tax cut plan.
I feel sure that this junket brought votes and enhanced the southern legislators to vote for this tax measure. And the recipient of this tax measure will be the oil companies and all the refineries. And I'm still worried about the poor people in the state of Alabama who need to work and will work and cannot find jobs. And had this junket been used for that purpose, to go out and bring business and industry into the state of Alabama, I would have no qualms at all with it.
Horn says he's optimistic about the bill's passage, but admits it's in for an uphill battle. If passed, the bill would require those persons found guilty of using state aircrafts for personal use to reimburse the state within 30 days all costs of the trip. Kim Davis, WSFA, TV News.
Local PATCO President C.J. Favre says the group decided to picket after getting encouragement from Councilman Joe Reed and an okay from a PATCO lawyer. Last night, the City Council tabled for 1 week Favre's picketing permit request after the item failed to gain unanimous approval on its first reading before the Council. But Reed says he doesn't think the Council has the right to prevent the controllers from picketing as long as they don't obstruct traffic. Later, Favre contacted his attorney on the matter and was advised that it was okay as long as the picketers left if asked to do so by law enforcement officials. So about noon today, PATCO members and their spouses picketed in the median of Highway 80 directly in front of the airport's main entrance. Then about 1:40, an air traffic controller supervisor was injured in a car accident that happened directly in front of the picketers. Warren McCumber was on his way to work at Dannelly Field when the truck he was driving was hit on the passenger side and turned over. McCumber was taken to the Maxwell Air Force Hospital where he was treated and released. The other driver, William Laughlin of Helena, Alabama, was treated and released from Baptist Hospital. Officer William Jones says both drivers told him that their attention was distracted from driving because of the picketers. Officer Jones says he then asked the picketers to leave, and they left soon after. In the meantime, Favre says if the strike is still going on next week, he'll go before the council and ask for a permit. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
There was a switch in which of the two houses will be considering a more conservative budget. The House, which is following the recommendation of Governor James, will be considering a budget of about $1,337 million, while the Senate will be considering a budget of about $1,320 million. During the regular session, it was the House that considered a much more conservative budget. The Senate budget was quickly passed out of the committee with little to no discussion or changes. But in the House Ways and Means Committee, a number of people testified to the committee, including Finance Director Rex Rayner. Rayner defended the budget's approach to funding higher education, saying it departs from traditional funding methods, but is aimed at forcing the colleges to set priorities through fiscal discipline. The one approach that met the most opposition was an appropriation of $1 million each to what have been tagged the flagship universities, the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and Auburn University. Representative Frank Riddick of Huntsville, who represents an area including Alabama A&M and the University of Alabama at Huntsville, called that decision grossly unfair and later failed in an amendment to include UAH in the flagship extra appropriation. Alabama Education Association Executive Secretary Paul Hubbard made an emotional plea to the committee for increased benefits for teachers. Hubbard claimed that out of the new dollars available this year, he couldn't fathom teachers not getting any part of it in light of improved student competency testing during the last 3 years. Hubbard is particularly in favor of a statewide hospital medical insurance program for teachers. Governor James's proposal offers a conditional 25% increase in insurance money for teachers. The Ways and Means budget was also passed out. Meanwhile, the House Judiciary Committee not only passed out Governor James's reform budget isolation bill, it passed out 3 other versions of the same bill. Committee Chairman Rick Manley said it would only be fair to let the full House have an opportunity to debate all of the versions of the bill. The Judiciary Committee also passed out the congressional redistricting plan without any changes. Both the Senate and the House reconvene tomorrow. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Each of the 7 agencies represented expected some type of cuts in services. Gail Sanderlin from the Montgomery Housing Authority says her organization must cut its budget by 15%. She says those cuts will mean laying off employees and reducing some services, like child daycare and programs for the elderly. But she says the Housing Authority is trying to make up the funding through other agencies. A representative from the Montgomery County School Board of Education, Maggie Walker, explained that federal funds for the school lunch program won't be reduced as much as first anticipated, but says some adjustments will need to be made to continue to provide lunchroom service with less money. Other speakers tonight included representatives from the State Department of Education, the Montgomery Community Action Agency, Department of Pensions and Security, and Legal Services. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Today's order was made public while Judge Varner met with reporters for the state in his chambers, barring reporters and even Acting Prison Commissioner Joe Harper, who said the master plan will help his agency find permanent solutions to the overcrowding problem.
Okay, without this plan, are we just piecemeal, stop a crisis here, stop a crisis there?
That's correct. We've been putting out brush fires, are only arriving at short-term solutions and not looking toward the long-range solution to the problem, which is alleviating the overcrowding in all the jails within the state of Alabama, as well as having a progressive, ongoing correctional system.
Judge Varner gave all attorneys 10 days to file briefs giving their opinions as to whether or not State Attorney General Charles Graddick should be included as a party in the prison suit. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at Federal Court.
So it's been about a 4-year process for me to reach the journeyman level here in Montgomery, and this is where I wanted to be in the beginning, so I'm just now reaching that point.
And now it's all over.
Yeah, for now it is.
Grady Russell is 26 years old. He and his wife Joyce have 2 children, 2-year-old Jennifer and 5-month-old David. Russell lost his job as an air traffic controller yesterday because he chose to stay on strike rather than return to working conditions he considers unfair. In doing so, he failed to obey a law forbidding federal workers from striking. But he says the government also failed in some areas.
When 13,500 people, just like myself, make a decision to put their job on the line, there must be some reason, some underlying cause that makes this, and it's wrong. And somebody needs to address these issues. They say that I signed an oath, but the government made an oath to me too in a contract. The FAA has not been fair. I really don't believe they have. They are not addressing the issues that the controllers are addressing, and these issues are safety.
Russell says he'll have to look for work soon.
I can make it a few weeks, maybe a month, but I'm sure pretty soon I'm going to have to do something.
For now, Russell says he's still on strike, and he says he will continue to walk the picket lines for those things he thinks are right. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Burlington Northern City Manager David Jackson says his freight business has had very few delays since the strike. He says the company relies completely on commercial airlines, but because of a number of flight cancellations, he says they've also chartered planes to ensure that the customers' packages are delivered on time. Other air freight businesses say they've also had minor delays, and some say business has slowed down because people are afraid that their freight won't be delivered, but all say that they can deliver on time. Another business affected by the strike is the U.S. Mail. Local Postmaster J.D. Williams says mail delivered in Alabama and surrounding states is being delivered on time because it's sent by truck. But he says anything that takes more than 2 days to be delivered is usually flown and could be delayed by 1 or 2 days. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Joe Berry, a 10-year member of the South Y and a former member of the Board of Directors, says the announcement concerning the closing of the Y came unexpectedly. Joe is angry over the closing. He says it will drastically affect the lives of all of the area members and the lives of their children who enjoy the facility so much. He blames management for the closing.
Some of the executives, if they would spend as much time trying to save the Y as they work on their civic clubs, we would not be in this situation.
I was shocked. I'm disappointed. It's going to change my children's activities. Our life revolves around that Y. All Ys are run under the Metro Board, and it's their job to see that all the Ys function and serve the communities that they're in. And to me, if a Y fails, it speaks of a failure down there on their part.
Robert Fike, Assistant Director of the Metro YMCA's, says the definite decision to close the Y has not been made. Even so, he readily admits that the South Y should be closed because he says it's all a matter of economics. Currently, there is a 200-family membership. He says it would take no less than 300 more families to keep the Y open. He says the final decision on the closing will be made when the Y Board of Directors meets next Tuesday. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The Capitol Rotunda was overflowing with lobbyists and others awaiting the debate in both the Senate and the House on the two versions of the education budgets. In the House, members found material passed out by the Alabama Education Association endorsing the proposed educator insurance plan and insinuating that House Speaker Joe McCorkadale had a vested interest in defeating that proposal, an insinuation that led to one of the Speaker's rare visits to the podium.
This is not an untruth. It's a lie. Pure and simple. But it was smut, and it was smut trying to discredit me.
The House battle over the governor's proposed budget was long, lasting until about 4. One major change to the budget came from Montgomery's Larry Dixon eliminating the university flagship appropriation concept of a $3 million appropriation and putting it into elementary and secondary school operating money. Later, Tuscaloosa's Roy Johnson switched most of that money into classroom supply funds. The conditional insurance increase remained intact as the House overwhelmingly passed the budget. Over in the Senate, Finance and Taxation Committee Chairman Richmond Pearson sailed his smaller budget through without any changes. Because both budgets vary on the total dollars, funding to higher education, insurance, and retirement, it will likely lead to each House rejecting the others and a conference committee hammering out the differences. Pearson also defended his version of the governor's budget isolation bill, which would require the budgets to be passed by the 15th legislative day and would allow voters to decide on it 3 months from now. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
I don't know if you can compare styles. I think a lot of people would probably say that the Southeastern Conference is more physical than we are, and the Big Ten too, and we're sort of like a finesse conference, or I don't know if it's because a lot of coaches in our league think it's officiating. I'm inclined to agree. I think we call them too close in our league, but I don't know. All leagues are good, and they're all tough, and it's hard to compare styles in one and styles in another. They're all good.
into them and the rationalizations that have followed. As Mr. I think of Mr. Oldgrove, who was the chaplain when I returned after World War II. He lost his wife and baby, blown to bits. I think of so many people. I could tell you so many stories. Each person has his story, and each one has told a story to me. We need to regain, to restore to one another the values upon which civilizations have been built. Human qualities of caring, thinking broadly, widely, of the consequences of our actions. And mercy and forgiveness.
Governor James's budget isolation ideas apparently caught on. There are 9 bills in the House and Senate creating various methods to isolate the budget process. The governor's version has been introduced in the House by Representative George Clark and in the Senate by Richmond Pearson. The Pearson bill flew through the Senate Thursday with only minor changes. His bill would allow each House to work on other bills, but wouldn't allow those bills to be transferred to the other chamber until the budgets are passed. Clark's bill in the House does virtually the same thing, but the House adjourned Thursday right in the middle of debate on his bill. The other versions of the isolation bills are similar, but vary in deadlines by which the budgets must be passed and penalties for not passing a budget. For instance, Senator Charles Brittenell's bill would force legislators to forfeit most of their legislative pay if there is no budget adopted. And at least one bill introduced by Birmingham's Bob Gafford sets up a special session at the beginning of each year specifically to handle the budgets. Thursday, House Speaker Joe McCorkadale added a new twist, offering an amendment that would force the legislature to return free of pay should they pass a budget that eventually goes into proration. Aide to the Speaker, Dennis Latham, says McCorkadale plans to offer that amendment to any version of the isolation bill in hopes of not only forcing the legislature to consider a budget early, but also to provide some leverage to pass a budget that doesn't spend more tax dollars than are brought in each year. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The underpaid educators responsible for many of society's ills, and as a member of the most blamed profession life, that of being a prisoner of war, God bless you, Godspeed. The safety aspect of it too, as far as the military controllers really are what we feel is qualified because of the opportunity of the different. There. Roger. 15, wind 270 at 6, altimeter 2983, report base. 2983, and report base, now 67. Well, I think that at any given point where you take somebody out of an environment they've been working in and then have to put them into a new one, there's going to be a little bit of reorientation as far as to the area. Military, we move a lot as it is, and every time we go into a different area, we have to be reorientated. The people that we came through tonight, last night, this morning, they are experienced, and I think that they do have the ability to probably work in the fields given the time that they need.
Captain R.H. Shreve says since the controllers went out on strike last Monday, everything has been running very smoothly. He says the personnel working in the airport tower have responded rapidly, and he says there have been no delays.
We feel that it's perfectly safe. Nothing has changed at all so far as we can see. We came down last night from Boston to Washington to Atlanta and then over to Montgomery, and nowhere along the line did we see any change whatsoever. It was just exactly as it had been before, and as a matter of fact, we detected a little bit more professionalism and just a little bit of pride in the way that they were doing their job last night. They're very quick and very thorough, very professional.
Most of the tower personnel are supervisors, who Captain Shreve says are more qualified than the controllers, and he says the pilots would be able to tell very quickly if they weren't doing the job well. In the meantime, all the airlines serving Montgomery's Danley Field are back to providing 100% of the local flights. Delta Airlines canceled only one flight today. Republic canceled one yesterday, but was back to full capacity today, and ASA is operating all 5 of its flights, plus an additional one. Delta's marketing manager Ken Krill says even though locally Delta will offer all its flights, there will still be some reductions on the national level. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
In 1976, 30-year-old David Candidate of Montgomery was charged with the stabbing death of a Montgomery musician. Candidate was found innocent by reason of insanity and committed to Bryce Hospital in Tuscaloosa. In early 1980, Candidate was released from the hospital despite objections from the judge who placed him there. Candidate assaulted a local resident and was returned to Bryce. He was released under protest again last March, and now he's charged with the stabbing death of 38-year-old Felix Richardson of Hayneville. Today, Richardson's sister, Mrs. Lee Hicks, filed a suit in federal court. Her lawyer, Wallace Chandler, says the civil rights of Richardson were violated when Candidate was released. Mrs. Hicks says she filed the suit because she doesn't want to see this sort of thing happen again.
It has happened before. He's already murdered one man, and he was in Bryce Hospital for that, and then they let him out. And I can't understand it. Because my brother was just walking down the street.
The suit names, among others, the director of Bryce Hospital, the hospital itself, the Alabama Department of Mental Health, and Governor Fob James as its receiver. Chandler says the defendants allowed the release of a man they knew to be dangerous to himself and to the public. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Cooper was arrested at Eastdale Mall today after he allegedly accepted $3,000 from an undercover agent posing as a relative of inmate Jerry McCarver. Cooper's arrest warrant charges that he received the money after promising to get an early release for inmate McCarver. The 42-year-old Cooper said nothing when asked for comments by reporters. TV 12 News has learned that investigators have taped recordings of Cooper allegedly making his offer to the inmate. Prison Commissioner Joe Hopper said corrections investigators may have other board employees targeted in the probe.
There is an ongoing investigation within the department, the facts of which and the numbers of individuals involved I cannot reveal at this time.
District Attorney Jimmy Evans also said others are being investigated in connection with the parole buying scheme, and a grand jury investigation will begin on the case.
It is obvious that an arrest of this nature would signify additional investigations. It is obvious that there's a great deal of work to be done. Commissioner Hopper and other security folks at the Board of Corrections and other law enforcement agencies have pledged cooperation and assistance. The Montgomery County Grand Jury will undertake, through this office, a major investigation into occurrences such as alleged in this warrant of arrest for Andrew Lloyd Cooper, and that investigation will continue and no effort will be spared.
TV 12 News has also learned that several high officials in state government are targets of the grand jury probe, and that at least one Montgomery attorney is being investigated for alleged involvement in the case. Officials refuse to name the attorney. We also have found out that the attorney is on tape, allegedly promising an inmate that he could secure early release, transfer, or work release for him for a fee. A former parole department official is also under investigation in connection with the case. Sources say the price list was this: $1,000 for transfer from a maximum security prison to the state's cattle farm, $1,500 for transfer to the work release center, and early parole is reportedly to be $3,000 to $5,000. My sources inside the state's prison system say it had been rumored for years that these things could be bought. But today's arrest of Andrew Cooper, the state's first black prison official, may have given credibility to all the rumors. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Would it be neat? Thank you, gentlemen. So that stadium and the stadium lease, which the Raiders had signed many years ago, will not be violated. And I think there's a good possibility that they'll take in another team, so they'll have 5 or 6 5-team division. Ryan Howard, get about a block away from his house, let's say, and this guy hauls off and hits Howard in the back game in Kansas City one time. We were a game behind the Cleveland Browns. We had to win to get into a tie, first-place tie with Cleveland. Tremendous snowstorm developed during the game. Couldn't even measure for first down. You couldn't see the yard line markers anywhere. There was an argument on the sideline. We were tied 10-10 close to the end of the game with about less than a half a minute to go. We're out somewhere close to midfield, and Howell, as I mentioned, was the head coach, and Lombardi, who ran the offense, had to make a decision whether to try for a first down or whether we should try for a field goal. Howell said, let's go for the field goal. Lombardi said, no way. Our kicker can't get it that far, which, of course, was me. Somewhere near the midfield stripe, as I say. Anyway, Howell overruled Lombardi. We tried the field goal. I made it. Got back to the sideline. The first person I saw was Lombardi. And he said, you know damn well you still can't kick it that far. 1974, when the players had their only walkout that I can recall, the NFL players, they played the Hall of Fame game. I broadcast the game, as a matter of fact, one of the most difficult jobs that I've ever had because you didn't know who the heck was playing. They brought in rookies, free agents, and those players that were not members of the association, they played the game. And amazingly enough, the television ratings were quite good, and the game wasn't bad. You just didn't know who was playing. Amazing thing about football, the insatiable, seemingly, appetite of the football fans in this country. Of course, there's never been a game like football that's made for television. 25, 30 seconds between every play, you can regroup and criticize the quarterback and get a beer, and then they start again.
It's a long way from Boston to California, especially when you're walking most of the way. But for Tom Ehrenfeld and David Kissinger, they say it's the only way to really enjoy seeing the land and its people. Tom is a student at Georgetown. His friend David attends Yale. They've been friends since high school. The cross-country walk is something they wanted to do for a long time.
It's sort of a once-in-a-lifetime chance because it's just so free. It really doesn't accomplish anything, but it's like for the sake of freedom to just cut yourself loose.
David says he and Tom have learned a lot about the different kinds of people all across the U.S.
The surprise is like you come into pockets where there's certain, groups of people and cultures that you don't expect to come across.
It's the people that's always surprising because they're just some unbelievable people out in this country that you can't even dream of. I mean, you can be told about the Grand Canyon, but you can't be told about some of the people you're going to meet out there.
Tom and David are on their way back to their homes in Boston. So far, they've chalked up about 5,000 miles. However, not all of the journey has been on foot. From time to time, they've done a little hitchhiking. They arrived in Montgomery last night.
We were in New Orleans a few nights ago, and then we got in here. So my major impression is one of incredible hospitality.
Friendliness, just, elegance. It's been quite a scene. We've really gotten just a small glimpse at it. From what we've seen, it's been quite an impression.
Tom and David said it will probably be September before they complete their journey, but they say that's fine. They expect the rewards and memories of the summer of 1981 to last them a lifetime. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
My position is that we're going to start telling on these Uncle Toms. They've gotten by for too long.
They've sold us out. They've gone in the back rooms and made their deals. They've forgotten about the folks who elected them, and the time has come for all Uncle Toms in public office to be eliminated. I'm not talking about people who may differ. I'm talking about people who are selling out, like we had in Montgomery about 2 weeks ago. And I'm talking about anybody, that person, anybody else like that person. We're just not going to keep having to fight folks like Emory Foreman, turn around and have to fight folks like Luther Oliver. We can't fight both of them at the same time. The time has come for us to have to deal with these issues, and there's no need of us who are trying to fight to make a difference to keep fighting when we got some of our own folks tying our hands behind our backs.
Reed says it's time to make a clear distinction between President Reagan's personality and his programs. He says the president is a movie star who has a very fine personality and is very articulate.
But until when September 30th comes, when the Carter budget is no longer in effect, when the Reagan budget takes over, we in America are going to literally see people going to bed hungry at night. The Reagan program, what it's going to do to the elderly, the elderly people. Here we're talking about people making $122 a month, and they got to take that away. That doesn't cross any color lines. We're talking about people living or dying.
Reed says the Reagan tax cut is designed to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. He says it wouldn't have passed in Congress if some Democrats hadn't voted for it. Reed says it's time for the ADC to stand firm against Democrats who vote Republican by only supporting political candidates who remain faithful to the Democratic Party. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
For calling the meeting together, and Chris is a stickler for starting on time. And since there are many white elected officials in this state and in this nation who also benefited from the 1965 Voting Rights Act. So when we take steps to strengthen the act, we are not talking about for black people. We are not talking about for white people. We are talking about good people. And Uncle Tom and a Republican.
It gives you a chance to accomplish something for yourself, and you give something back to your communities, because the communities, oftentimes the government has gotten so big that they can't take care of everything, that the volunteer needs to be more important in the communities. There is a definite need for the volunteer. They need to do something for themselves to get